When you hear the word Washington, what comes to mind? Is it the White House? Congress? The endless debates and headlines of politics in Washington, D.C.? For most of the world, that's exactly what the name Washington means. But here's the twist: there is another Washington, one that most people overlook. A Washington that is not about politics and power, but about mountains, rainforests, deserts, and coastlines. A Washington that tells a story of innovation and tradition, of natural beauty and human resilience. Welcome to Washington State, a place wilder, greener, and far more mysterious than you may have ever imagined. Picture it. A drone shot slowly climbing above the Seattle skyline. The Space Needle gleams like a futuristic beacon, while behind it towers the mighty Mount Rainier, its snow-covered peak catching the first light of morning. Down below, the city bustles with life. Ferries cut across Puget Sound, skyscrapers rise against the horizon, and coffee drinkers crowd into cafes that seem to be on every corner. But this is only the surface. Washington is not just Seattle, and Seattle is not just skyscrapers. This is a state where every turn of the road can take you somewhere completely new. Drive west and you'll find yourself surrounded by emerald forests dripping with mist, some of the oldest temperate rainforests in the world. Walk among trees so tall they seem to touch the sky, in places where moss blankets every branch and silence feels almost sacred. Now take that same drive eastward across the Cascade Mountains, and suddenly the landscape transforms. The air grows drier, the forests fade away, and you're standing in vast golden plains under a blazing sun. Orchards stretch for miles, wheat fields ripple like waves, and deserts shimmer in the heat. It feels like two different worlds, but it's all Washington. That's what makes this place so extraordinary. It is a land of paradoxes. The same state that is home to Microsoft, Amazon, and some of the world's most powerful tech giants is also a place where Native American tribes continue to live by traditions passed down for centuries. In the same waters where massive container ships carry goods across the Pacific, salmon still return every year on their ancient migration routes. Washington is both a symbol of progress and a keeper of heritage, both urban and untamed. And there is more. Most people imagine Washington as a land of endless rain. It's the stereotype that's stuck: coffee, clouds, and grey skies. Yet here's a surprise: eastern Washington is dry, sometimes even desert-like, with sunny skies dominating most of the year. The contrast is staggering. Washington holds both the wettest place in the continental United States and some of the driest farmland you'll find anywhere in the West. These contradictions are not flaws, they are what make Washington a state like no other. By the end of this journey, you will see that Washington isn't just the evergreen state, it's a place of hidden contrasts that might just change the way you think about America. It's not simply rain and coffee, not just a hub for airplanes and software, but a land where every mountain, river, and city tells a story. A state that has reinvented itself again and again, from ancient tribal homelands to frontier territory, from logging towns to high-tech capitals. And through it all, its landscapes have remained as breathtaking and unpredictable as ever. So buckle up, because what lies ahead is more than a travel guide. This is a story about a place that defies expectations. We'll uncover its history, dive into its culture, explore its natural wonders, and discover the challenges it faces in the modern world. This is Washington State, full of secrets, full of beauty, and full of surprises. By the time we reach the end, you may never hear the name Washington the same way again. Imagine a map of the United States slowly zooming toward the top left corner. There, in the Pacific Northwest, lies Washington State, a land perched on the edge of the continent, pressed between the Pacific Ocean and the rugged spine of the Rocky Mountains. To its south lies Oregon, sharing a border shaped by the winding Columbia River. To the east stretches Idaho, a thinner, quieter neighbor. To the north, Washington reaches into Canada, linking directly with British Columbia. And to the west, the Pacific Ocean roars against its coastline, a reminder that this state is not only connected to America but also to the wider world across the water. Washington's geography is like a storybook written in bold chapters, each one completely different from the last. The dividing line is the Cascade Range, a chain of mountains that slices the state right down the middle. On the western side, the air is heavy with moisture carried inland from the Pacific. Here you'll find landscapes that seem like they've been stolen from another world. moss-covered trees, rain-soaked coastlines, and forests so thick with evergreens that it feels like nature never ends. This is where the Olympic Peninsula sits, home to one of the only temperate rainforests on Earth. Step into the Hoh rainforest, and you'll feel as if you've traveled back in time to a prehistoric world, where ferns cover the ground and water drips endlessly from branches. But cross those same Cascades, and everything changes. The clouds break, the air dries, and suddenly Washington looks less like a rainforest and more like the Wild West. This is eastern Washington, a land of open skies, rolling hills, and fertile plains. It's the heart of agriculture in the state, producing apples, cherries, hops, and wheat on a massive scale. Instead of dense forest, you'll see sprawling orchards and vineyards that stretch as far as the eye can see. Summers here are hot and dry, winters can be bitterly cold, and the rhythm of life revolves around farming and the land. It feels worlds apart from the cool, misty cities of the West, yet together, both halves make Washington whole. That sharp contrast is what defines Washington's identity. On one side, it is lush and green, famous for its towering trees and endless rain. On the other, it is dry and sun-baked, with deserts and farmland that surprise visitors who only know the Seattle stereotype. This dual nature makes Washington feel like two states in one, divided not just by mountains, but by lifestyle, climate, and culture. And then, above all this variety, stand the volcanoes. Yes, volcanoes. Washington is home to some of the most dramatic and potentially dangerous peaks in the continental United States. Mount Baker, Mount Adams, Glacier Peak, and, of course, the mighty Mount St. Helens, all part of the fiery ring of fire that circles the Pacific Ocean. In 1980, Mount St. Helens erupted in one of the most catastrophic volcanic events in modern history, blowing away its summit and covering much of the region in ash. It was a reminder that beneath Washington's natural beauty lies raw, untamed power. But towering over them all is Mount Rainier, the state's highest peak at 14,411 feet. Its snow-capped slopes are visible from almost anywhere in western Washington, dominating the horizon like a watchful guardian. Yet Rainier is more than just beautiful, it is also considered one of the most dangerous volcanoes in the world. Its massive glacier, combined with the possibility of future eruptions, pose a serious threat to nearby cities and towns. Scientists say that if Rainier were to erupt, it could unleash massive mudflows called lahars that would sweep through valleys and reach communities within hours. It's a sobering thought, hidden behind the mountain's serene appearance. And that's the plot twist most people never realize. Washington isn't just the land of rain and forests, it's a land built on fire, shaped by volcanoes, and constantly living under their shadow. From the lush rainforests of the west to the dry farmlands of the east, from fertile valleys to snow-capped peaks, Washington is a state of extremes. Geography here isn't just background scenery, it's the main character in the story. It defines how people live, what they grow, where they work, and even the risks they face. So when you look at Washington on a map, don't just see a corner of the United States. See a state of contrasts, carved by mountains, fed by rivers, bordered by oceans, and watched over by volcanoes that remind us that this land is still alive. Washington is home to nearly 8 million people, a population that has been steadily growing as more and more people discover what this state has to offer. Most of them live in the western part of the state, particularly in the booming Seattle metropolitan area, where nearly 4 million people are concentrated in a vibrant corridor stretching from Everett in the north to Tacoma in the south. This area is the heartbeat of Washington, filled with the energy of commerce, technology, and cultural exchange. But what makes Washington truly fascinating isn't just how many people live here, it's who they are and how their stories intertwine. At its core, Washington is a state of diversity. This diversity is visible in its people, its neighborhoods, and even in the languages you hear on its streets. Seattle, for example, is a city where you can grab sushi at one corner, authentic Mexican tacos at another, and fresh-caught salmon smoked using native traditions just a few blocks away. More than 29 federally recognized Native American tribes call Washington home, each carrying a heritage that stretches back thousands of years before this land became a U.S. state. Tribes such as the Yakama, the Lummi, the Quinault, and the Nez Perce maintain deep ties to the land, rivers, and forests that shaped their cultures long before settlers arrived. For these communities, salmon is not just food, it's a sacred part of their identity, a symbol of life that connects past, present, and future. Overlaying this native presence is an equally strong influence from immigrants and newcomers. Washington has long been a gateway for people from Asia, thanks in part to its position on the Pacific Rim. Today, you'll find thriving communities of Chinese, Japanese, Filipino, Vietnamese, Korean, and Indian residents, many of whom came during waves of migration in the 19th and 20th centuries and continue to arrive today. Their impact is visible everywhere, from international festivals that light up the streets of Seattle to the Asian groceries and restaurants that have become staples in cities across the state. Add to this a growing Hispanic and Latino population, particularly in agricultural regions like Yakima and the Tri-Cities, where Spanish is as common as English, and you see a cultural mosaic that is both vibrant and constantly evolving. And then there's Seattle's global reputation as the coffee capital of the world. This is the birthplace of Starbucks, a brand that turned coffee culture into a global phenomenon. But beyond Starbucks, Seattle's streets are lined with independent cafes, each one offering a different take on the craft of coffee. It's not just about caffeine, it's about community. The coffee house culture here reflects the people themselves, diverse, creative, and always searching for connection. Yet, Washington's identity isn't only futuristic or urban. For all its modern achievements, home to tech titans like Microsoft and Amazon, and a hub for innovation, the state remains deeply tied to traditions that are thousands of years old. Walk through Pike Place Market in downtown Seattle, and you'll see this blend in action. Farmers selling fresh produce next to fishmongers throwing salmon through the air, artisans offering handmade crafts, and tribal artists selling carvings inspired by generations of storytelling. The new and the ancient live side by side, each shaping the character of Washington in its own way. What makes Washington's people especially unique is this sense of coexistence. It's a state where software engineers build the future in glass towers while just a few hours away, tribal members continue fishing the same rivers their ancestors did. It's a place where immigrants bring flavors and traditions from across the globe, while locals embrace them and fold them into the ever-expanding cultural fabric. And it's a place where no single group tells the whole story, because the story of Washington is, and always has been, about many voices coming together. So yes, Washington is high-tech, forward-looking, and deeply global. But look a little closer, and you'll see that its identity isn't just about innovation or industry. It's also about roots in the land, in the rivers, in the traditions of tribes that have lived here since time immemorial. Washington is a state where the future is constantly being built, but where the past still whispers in the wind, reminding everyone who lives here that culture is not only about progress, it's also about memory. Long before skyscrapers rose in Seattle, long before airplanes filled the skies over Puget Sound, and even before American settlers built their first cabins in the Pacific Northwest, this land was alive with people, culture, and story. For thousands of years, tribes such as the Chinook, the Nez Perce, and the Yakama thrived here, shaping their lives around the rhythms of rivers, forests, and mountains. The Chinook controlled the lower Columbia River, masters of trade and navigation, building massive cedar canoes that could carry dozens of people. The Nez Perce lived further inland, famed for their horsemanship and resilience, while the Yakama thrived in central Washington, cultivating roots, berries, and salmon as part of their seasonal cycles. For these communities, the land was not simply territory, it was identity. Rivers like the Columbia and the Snake were lifelines, providing salmon that fed both body and spirit. Forests provided cedar for totem poles, canoes, and homes. The mountains were sacred, places of vision and myth. This was a Washington where every peak, every stream, every tree carried meaning, and where culture flowed in harmony with nature. Then came the outsiders. In the early 1800s, the Lewis and Clark expedition carved its way west, sent by President Thomas Jefferson to map a path to the Pacific. Their journey brought them through the rugged landscapes of what is now Washington, and their records told the world of a region rich in resources, ripe for trade and settlement. But they were not the first Europeans to arrive here. For decades, British traders, mainly through the Hudson's Bay Company, had already built a presence. They established forts, controlled trade routes, and sought to extend British influence across the Pacific Northwest. And here lies the plot twist. Washington was not always destined to be fully American. In fact, until 1846, much of the land we now call Washington was under joint occupation by both the United States and Britain. This uneasy arrangement was part of what was known as the Oregon Country, stretching from California's northern border all the way into modern-day British Columbia. Both nations laid claim, both set up trade networks, and both waited to see who would dominate. For a time, Washington's future truly hung in the balance. The standoff ended with the Oregon Treaty of 1846, in which the border was drawn along the 49th parallel. The northern lands became part of British Canada, while the southern lands, today's Washington, Oregon, and Idaho, fell under American control. Washington's destiny had shifted forever, but the echoes of that disputed past can still be felt along its northern border. From there, Washington began its transformation. In 1853, the Washington Territory was created, split off from the larger Oregon Territory. Settlers streamed in, lured by fertile farmland, rich forests, and the promise of opportunity. Timber became one of the territory's first great industries, with loggers felling massive Douglas firs that were shipped around the world. Gold and coal followed, drawing miners into the hills. And with settlement came conflict. Native tribes resisted as treaties stripped them of their lands, leading to wars, forced removals, and broken promises that still weigh heavily on the history of the state. By the late 1800s, Washington was growing rapidly, and its people wanted full recognition. That recognition came on November 11, 1889, when Washington was officially admitted as the 42nd state of the United States. In that moment, Washington joined the Union not as a frontier territory but as a state brimming with potential, its forests, rivers, and ports already laying the foundation for the industries that would define its future. Imagine those old black and white photographs. Men in suspenders posing beside giant tree stumps as wide as houses, native leaders standing with solemn faces at treaty signings, steamships docking at early Seattle piers. Washington's past is not just a string of dates, but a living story of resilience, ambition, and struggle. From the first peoples who carved their stories into the cedar, to the explorers who drew maps of the unknown, to the settlers who pushed westward with dreams of land and fortune, each left their mark on this land. Today, when you walk through Washington's cities and wilderness, you are walking on layers of history. The tribal nations who remain are still here, their voices strong, their traditions alive. The boundary disputes with Britain may be settled, but they remind us that history could have taken a very different turn. And that moment in 1889, when Washington became the 42nd state, was not an ending but a beginning, the start of a story that would continue to evolve, shaping the Washington we know today. If Washington is the evergreen state, then Seattle is the shining jewel at its center, the beating heart that gives rhythm to the entire region. Nestled between the waters of Puget Sound and the snowy peaks of the Cascades, Seattle is a city that feels alive the moment you arrive. It's a place where history, culture, and innovation collide, where the smell of saltwater mingles with the aroma of fresh brewed coffee, and where futuristic skylines rise against a backdrop of mountains and sea. No image captures Seattle's identity better than the Space Needle. Built in 1962 for the World's Fair, this futuristic tower was designed to symbolize the age of space exploration. Standing at over 600 feet, it became an icon not just for the city, but for the entire Pacific Northwest. Today, millions of visitors ride its elevators each year to catch panoramic views of Mount Rainier, the Olympic Mountains, and the glittering city below. For many, the Space Needle is the ultimate postcard moment, a reminder that Seattle isn't just any city, it's a vision of the future. But for all its futuristic flair, Seattle is also deeply rooted in tradition. Nowhere is that more clear than Pike Place Market, one of the oldest continuously operated farmers' markets in the United States. Opened in 1907, Pike Place has become a sensory explosion. The smell of fresh flowers, the taste of local produce, the sounds of buskers playing violins or guitars, and of course, the sight of fishmongers hurling salmon through the air with theatrical precision. The famous flying fish of Pike Place aren't just a gimmick. They're a performance of community, a ritual that symbolizes Seattle's blend of work, play, and personality. Walk through the stalls, and you'll find crafts, fresh seafood, global cuisines, and even the first Starbucks store, a tiny cafe that sparked a worldwide coffee revolution. Coffee and Seattle go hand in hand, but today the city is also synonymous with something even bigger: technology. Over the past few decades, Seattle has transformed into one of the world's leading innovation hubs. Microsoft, founded by Bill Gates and Paul Allen just outside the city in Redmond, helped usher in the personal computer revolution. Amazon, born in Jeff Bezos' garage as an online bookstore, now dominates global e-commerce, cloud computing, and beyond, all headquartered in the heart of Seattle. The result? A tech-fueled boom that has reshaped the city, bringing gleaming skyscrapers, thousands of high-paying jobs, and an influx of people from around the world. Yet here's where the story takes a turn, the plot twist you might not expect. For all its futuristic skylines and billion-dollar companies, Seattle is also the birthplace of something raw, rebellious, and deeply human: grunge music. In the late 1980s and early 1990s, bands like Nirvana, Pearl Jam, Alice in Chains, and Soundgarden exploded out of Seattle's underground music scene, changing the sound of rock forever. With its heavy guitar riffs, raw lyrics, and anti-establishment attitude, grunge became the voice of a generation. The world suddenly turned its eyes to Seattle, not just for coffee or tech, but for a sound that defined the early 90s. That's the duality of Seattle. On one side, it's sleek, modern, and forward-looking, the headquarters of global giants shaping the future. On the other, it's gritty, artistic, and soulful, the birthplace of music that gave voice to disillusionment and raw emotion. Walk the streets of Capitol Hill or Belltown, and you'll still feel echoes of that underground music scene, in small clubs and graffiti-marked walls that tell stories of a city that refuses to forget its creative roots. Seattle, at its core, is a city of contrasts. It's where tech moguls and software engineers rub shoulders with street performers and musicians. It's where tourists line up for selfies at the Space Needle, while locals sip craft coffee in cozy cafes tucked away in quiet neighborhoods. It's where the buzz of modern innovation meets the timeless call of art, music, and community. This is what makes Seattle the beating heart of Washington. It's not just the biggest city, it's the place where the state's past, present, and future collide. A place that constantly reinvents itself, yet never forgets its roots. And whether you're standing atop the Space Needle, catching a fish at Pike Place, walking through Amazon's glass domes, or listening to a live band in a dimly lit club, you're experiencing Seattle in all its complexity. Futuristic yet nostalgic, polished yet rebellious, a city that is always alive. When people think of Washington state, Seattle often takes the spotlight with its skyline, tech giants, and coffee culture. But step outside the boundaries of the Emerald City, and you'll find that Washington's story is far richer than one metropolis. Each city across the state has its own identity, its own rhythm, and its own contribution to the larger mosaic that makes Washington unique. Seattle may be the star, but the supporting cast is just as compelling. Travel east, across the Cascade Mountains, and you'll arrive in Spokane, the hub of eastern Washington. Spokane feels different the moment you get there. Less rainy, more open, with golden hills and a slower pace of life. It's a city where history meets modern revival. Once known as a railroad and mining town, Spokane today is a growing center for education, medicine, and culture. The Spokane River runs straight through downtown, tumbling over dramatic waterfalls that give the city its heartbeat. Every summer, the city hosts Hoopfest, the largest 3-on-3 basketball tournament in the world, drawing tens of thousands of players and fans. Spokane is also the gateway to some of Washington's best outdoor adventures, from skiing in nearby resorts to hiking along rivers and forests. It may not have Seattle's global fame, but Spokane tells the story of resilience, reinvention, and regional pride. Head south toward Olympia, and you'll discover Washington's capital city. While it's far less famous than Seattle, Olympia holds a quiet power as the political nerve center of the state. Nestled at the southern tip of Puget Sound, Olympia is home to the Washington State Capitol, a grand domed building where decisions affecting 8 million residents are made every day. Yet Olympia isn't only about politics. It's a small city with a quirky, artsy vibe, home to indie theaters, vibrant murals, and a culture of activism. The city's waterfront is lined with parks and marinas, and its community is known for being environmentally conscious, fiercely independent, and unafraid to speak out. Olympia might not appear in glossy tourist brochures as often as Seattle or Spokane, but its role in shaping Washington's laws, policies, and cultural direction is impossible to ignore. To the north lies Bellingham, a coastal gem perched between Seattle and the Canadian border. Bellingham feels like a crossroads, a place where students, adventurers, and dreamers all collide. It's the home of Western Washington University, which gives the city a youthful, intellectual energy. But it's also a launch point for outdoor exploration, with easy access to both the San Juan Islands and the rugged peaks of Mount Baker. The city's downtown has a laid-back, bohemian feel, full of local breweries, art galleries, and coffee shops that reflect the creative spirit of its people. Bellingham is one of those cities that travelers stumble upon and never want to leave, because it balances small-town charm with the gateway to some of Washington's most spectacular natural wonders. Further south, you'll find Tacoma, a city that has long lived in Seattle's shadow but has carved out its own identity. Known historically as a gritty port and industrial hub, Tacoma has reinvented itself in recent years as a center for art and culture. The Museum of Glass, with its striking architecture and live glass-blowing demonstrations, pays tribute to the city's most famous native, glass artist Dale Chihuly. The revitalized waterfront, bustling with restaurants and parks, shows Tacoma's transformation from an industrial town into a thriving urban center. Yet Tacoma hasn't lost its edge, it's still proud of its working-class roots and remains an important economic engine for the region. Venture into the central part of the state, and the landscape begins to change. Here lies Yakima, a city surrounded by sun-drenched valleys that produce some of the best wine and apples in the country. In fact, Washington is second only to California in wine production, and much of that comes from the Yakima Valley. Orchards stretch for miles, vineyards roll across the hills, and farm-to-table culture thrives here. Yakima tells a different story from Seattle's fast-paced tech scene. It's about agriculture, tradition, and the people who work the land. This is Washington's breadbasket, where the state's reputation as a global leader in fruit and wine begins. And then there are the Tri-Cities, Kennewick, Pasco, and Richland, a cluster of cities in southeastern Washington that together form one of the fastest-growing regions in the state. Known for sunny weather, outdoor recreation, and a strong science and energy presence, the Tri-Cities have become a hub for research and development, especially in nuclear and clean energy. The Columbia River winds through all three cities, offering boating, fishing, and a sense of connection to Washington's great waterways. Unlike the misty coasts of the West, the Tri-Cities showcase Washington's drier, sunnier side, a reminder that the state is far more geographically diverse than many outsiders realize. Each of these cities tells a different story. Seattle might be about tech and innovation, Spokane about resilience, Olympia about politics, Bellingham about creativity, Tacoma about reinvention, Yakima about agriculture, and the Tri-Cities about science and energy. Together, they paint a picture of a state that cannot be defined by one place alone. Washington is a chorus of voices, each city adding its own melody to the symphony of the evergreen state. And that's the hook. In Washington, no matter where you go, there's always another story waiting to be discovered. Here's where Washington takes your breath away. Few states in America pack as much natural variety into their borders as Washington. The evergreen state is a playground of contrasts, where you can walk through moss-draped rainforests in the morning, climb glacier by afternoon, and watch the sunset over rolling deserts by evening. It's not just scenery, it's a symphony of landscapes, each one with its own personality, waiting to or anyone bold enough to explore it. Let's begin with Olympic National Park, a crown jewel of the Pacific Northwest and a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Imagine stepping into a world where towering evergreens are wrapped in curtains of moss, where waterfalls spill down cliffs, and where elk quietly graze in meadows drenched in mist. The Hoh Rainforest, one of the park's highlights, feels almost prehistoric. It's so lush and green that it looks like something straight out of a fantasy film. But Olympic isn't just rainforest, it's also wild coastline. Along the park's Pacific shores, waves crash against rugged sea stacks, tide pools brim with colorful starfish, and bald eagles circle above. Few places on Earth combine ocean, mountains, and rainforest in one park. Olympic isn't just a natural wonder, it's like three parks in one. Travel inland, and you'll find Mount Rainier National Park, dominated by the mighty peak of Mount Rainier itself. Rising over 14,000 feet, Rainier is the highest mountain in Washington and one of the most iconic sights in the entire country. On a clear day, you can see it looming over the Seattle skyline, a giant of ice and stone. But up close, Rainier is even more breathtaking. Glaciers carve their way down its slopes, wildflower meadows explode with color in summer, and climbers from around the world test themselves against its icy summit. Yet, Rainier isn't just beautiful, it's also dangerous. Scientists consider it one of the most hazardous volcanoes in the world, not because it erupts often, but because of the millions of people living in its shadow. That mix of beauty and potential destruction makes Rainier one of Washington's most dramatic landmarks. Head north, and you'll discover the North Cascades, often nicknamed the American Alps. This rugged range is a wonderland of jagged peaks, hidden valleys, and more glacier than any other place in the lower 48 states. Unlike the tourist-heavy trails of Rainier, the North Cascades feel remote and untamed. Imagine alpine lakes the color of turquoise gems, cliffs rising straight into the sky, and trails that make you feel like you're walking through a painting. For hikers and adventurers, this region is paradise. Every step feels like a journey deeper into nature's masterpiece. Then there's the Columbia River Gorge, a natural wonder that doubles as a dividing line between Washington and Oregon. The Columbia River cuts through towering basalt cliffs, creating one of the most striking river canyons in North America. It's a place of power, literally and figuratively. Hydroelectric dams harness the river's energy, fueling much of the Pacific Northwest, while windsurfers and kiteboarders take to the water, riding waves powered by the gorge's famously strong winds. On the Washington side, dramatic waterfalls tumble down cliffs, vineyards stretch across the hillsides, and scenic viewpoints reveal landscapes that shift with every bend of the river. The Columbia River Gorge is not just a geographical marvel, it's a reminder of how nature and human innovation intersect. And here's the twist. When people imagine Washington, they often picture endless rain. After all, Seattle is famous for its drizzly skies. But the truth might surprise you. Eastern Washington actually gets less rainfall than Boston. Cross over the Cascade Mountains, and the climate transforms. The lush, green forests of the west give way to dry, golden hills, vineyards, and desert-like plains. It's a stark contrast that most outsiders never expect. Washington, in reality, is a land of opposites, rainforests and deserts, glacier and farmlands, all coexisting within a single state. Washington's natural wonders aren't just sights to see, they're experiences to live. They're the reason millions of people hike, climb, paddle, and camp here every year. They're the heartbeats of the evergreen state, places that remind us how wild, how unpredictable, and how magnificent nature can truly be. Washington doesn't just run on coffee, it powers the world. When people think of America's economic engines, places like Wall Street or Silicon Valley usually come to mind. But quietly, and sometimes not so quietly, Washington state has been shaping global industries in ways most people don't even realize. From the skies above to the digital networks we use every day, from the apples in your lunchbox to the cargo ships that connect continents, Washington is a state that doesn't just grow, it fuels the future. Let's start with something that put Washington on the map long before Amazon Prime deliveries and cloud computing: aerospace. For over a century, Boeing has called Washington home. Back in 1916, William Boeing built a small seaplane company in Seattle. What started as a dream in a boathouse turned into one of the world's largest aerospace giants. Today, Boeing's massive facilities in Everett and Renton are legendary. The Everett plant is so huge it could fit Disneyland inside, and still have room to spare. These factories have produced aircraft that revolutionized air travel. The iconic 747 Queen of the Skies, the workhorse 737, and the sleek 787 Dreamliner. Every time a jetliner takes off somewhere in the world, there's a good chance Washington played a part in its creation. For the state, Boeing isn't just a company, it's part of the DNA. But Boeing isn't Washington's only global player. Move from airplanes to algorithms, and you'll find the state's other juggernaut: technology. In the 1970s, a young Bill Gates and Paul Allen, two kids from Seattle, had a vision of putting a computer on every desk. That vision became Microsoft. Headquartered in Redmond, Microsoft didn't just change Washington, It changed the entire world, powering offices, schools, and homes across the globe. And then came Amazon. Jeff Bezos started it in 1994 as an online bookstore run out of a garage. Today, its headquarters in Seattle dominates the skyline with glass spheres and futuristic offices. Amazon isn't just a company, it's a lifestyle, influencing how we shop, stream, and even talk to our smart devices. Between Microsoft and Amazon, Washington became something few expected, a second Silicon Valley. Seattle transformed into a magnet for tech workers, startups, and dreamers who wanted to build the future. The city's skyline is now a mix of cranes and glass towers, symbols of an economy charging forward. Yet, Washington's story isn't only about tech titans. Drive east of the Cascade Mountains, and you'll enter an entirely different world, the vast agricultural lands that quietly feed the nation. Washington is America's apple king. In fact, nearly 60% of all U.S. apples come from Washington's orchards. The state also dominates in hops, crucial for beer lovers, sweet cherries, pears, and award-winning wines. Yakima Valley and Walla Walla have become renowned wine regions, producing bottles that rival European vineyards. This side of Washington shows a balance. While the West Coast buzzes with high-tech energy, the East thrives on the timeless rhythms of farming, harvests, and soil. And then there's Washington's position as a gateway to the Pacific. With ports like Seattle and Tacoma, the state is a major hub for international trade, especially with Asia. Every day, massive cargo ships glide across Puget Sound, carrying goods that connect the U.S. to markets in China, Japan, South Korea, and beyond. These ports aren't just busy, they're lifelines of the global economy. If you've ever ordered electronics made in Asia, odds are they pass through Washington waters before reaching you. But here comes the twist. While Washington thrives on industry, innovation, and trade, it also plays by very unusual rules when it comes to taxes. Unlike most states, Washington has no state income tax. That's right. Residents here don't pay a dime of income tax. Sounds like paradise, right? Not so fast. The flip side is that Washington has one of the highest sales taxes in the country. So while your paycheck stays a little fuller, every trip to the store feels just a bit more expensive. It's a unique system that sparks constant debate. Is it fair, or does it hit working families hardest? Either way, it makes Washington one of the most financially distinctive states in America. The economy here is more than just numbers. It's a story of contrasts. From futuristic skyscrapers to quiet orchards, from roaring factories to serene vineyards, from airplanes that touch the skies to container ships that cross oceans, Washington is a state that thrives on variety. And that's its secret weapon. While other states may lean heavily on one industry, Washington spreads its bets: technology, aerospace, agriculture, and trade, making it not just resilient, but unstoppable. In the end, Washington isn't just about rain, coffee, or salmon. It's about powering the world, sometimes in ways you can see, like a jet soaring overhead, and sometimes in ways you can't, like a digital cloud storing your favorite photos. When it comes to politics, Washington state isn't just another blue dot on America's map. It's a fascinating case study in how geography and culture shape beliefs. On paper, Washington is proudly progressive. If you've heard about trailblazing policies in America, legalizing recreational marijuana, adopting green energy standards, pushing for higher minimum wages, there's a good chance Washington was among the first to make it happen. From Seattle's bustling streets to Olympia's policy halls, the state often acts like a testing ground for ideas that eventually ripple across the rest of the country. But here's where things get interesting. Washington is not one voice, it's two. On the west side of the Cascade Mountains, where Seattle, Tacoma, and Olympia lie, the politics lean heavily liberal. This region thrives on tech, diversity, and an international outlook. You'll find conversations about climate change, renewable energy, social justice, and innovation. Laws supporting LGBTQ+ rights, clean energy goals, and progressive taxation ideas often start here. For many residents west of the Cascades, Washington represents a future-forward state where policies can, and should, push boundaries. Now, cross over the Cascades into eastern Washington, and the story shifts dramatically. This is farm country, with rolling hills, open skies, and communities built around agriculture. Here, conservative values dominate. Residents often prioritize traditional industries, personal freedoms, and skepticism toward big government programs. Talk about taxes, gun rights, or environmental regulations, and you'll hear voices very different from Seattle's. While the West embraces electric cars and carbon limits, the East might push back, arguing that those policies overlook the realities of rural life and farming economies. This divide isn't subtle, it's striking. Elections often show Washington painted deep blue in the West and solid red in the East, with the Cascades acting like a literal and cultural wall between two different worldviews. It's as if one state contains two distinct countries, each proud, each passionate, and each convinced of its own path forward. But this divide isn't purely about politics, it's also about identity. Seattle may be famous worldwide for its tech skyline, its music history, and its coffee culture, but Spokane, Yakima, and the Tri-Cities have their own stories. They're stories of ranchers, farmers, small business owners, and communities bound by traditions that stretch back generations. For many people in eastern Washington, their values aren't outdated, they're rooted. To them, it's about protecting ways of life that could vanish in the shadow of rapid urban growth and globalization. And here's the plot twist. While most outsiders think Washington's biggest divide is political, the deeper divide is geographical. The Cascade Mountains don't just split landscapes, they split values. On one side, you have misty rainforests, global corporations, and progressive ideals. On the other, you find golden fields, conservative principles, and a slower rhythm of life. The mountains stand tall as a reminder that one state can hold wildly different truths at the same time. Yet, in this divide lies something uniquely Washingtonian, a balance of tension and coexistence. For every bill passed in Olympia, there are debates that echo across the state. For every high-tech innovation in Seattle, there's a harvest in Yakima that grounds the economy. It's a push and pull, a dialogue that never really ends but keeps shaping Washington into something more complex than a simple red or blue label. In many ways, Washington reflects America itself, a place where urban and rural, progressive and conservative, global and local are constantly negotiating space. And perhaps that's what makes Washington so compelling. It isn't one story, it's many. It isn't one voice, it's a chorus, sometimes harmonious, sometimes clashing, but always alive. By the end of the day, Washington isn't just a blue state on the map. It's a living laboratory of democracy, a landscape where politics and geography intertwine, and a reminder that even in division, there's a shared identity. A love for this land, its mountains, its rivers, and its promise. If politics and geography define Washington's structure, then culture and lifestyle are its heartbeat. To truly understand the evergreen state, you have to step away from the maps and policies and dive into the rhythm of everyday life, the things people cheer for, eat, listen to, and play. Because here in Washington, culture isn't just background noise, it's front and center, shaping the way the world sees this corner of America. Let's start with something every Washingtonian loves: sports. Few things unite a diverse state quite like game day. In Seattle, when the Seahawks hit the field, the entire city turns into a sea of navy and green. The roar of the 12s, that's what the fans call themselves, can literally shake the stadium. And it's not just football. The Mariners, Seattle's Major League Baseball team, bring summer nights alive at T-Mobile Park, while the Kraken, the brand new NHL team, have electrified the city with a wave of hockey fever. Then there are the Sounders, the soccer team that has built one of the most passionate fan bases in the US. Walk into a Seattle pub on match day, and you'll feel it. The drums, the chants, the energy that makes you forget it's even raining outside. Sports here aren't just entertainment. They're part of Washington's cultural identity, binding strangers together under one banner. And yet, Washington's official state sport might surprise you. It isn't football, baseball, or basketball, it's pickleball. Yes, that quirky game with paddles and a plastic ball, invented on Bainbridge Island in 1965, officially became the state sport in 2022. It started as a backyard pastime for families but has exploded into a global phenomenon. In many ways, pickleball reflects Washington itself, creative, accessible, and just a little unconventional. But culture in Washington isn't only played on fields and courts, it's also served on plates. The state's food culture is a feast of both land and sea. Fresh salmon, pulled straight from the Pacific, is a staple, celebrated in everything from fine dining to casual backyard grills. Washington's fertile valleys produce world-famous apples, so much so that the state supplies more than half of America's crop. Then there's the wine country of Yakima and Walla Walla, where vineyards roll across hills and tasting rooms buzz with conversation. And let's not forget the craft beer scene, fueled by the fact that Washington grows more hops than anywhere else in the United States. For foodies, Washington is heaven, a place where every bite tells a story about the land and the people who work it. But if you want to talk about culture with global reach, Washington's music scene is legendary. This is the birthplace of the grunge movement that took the world by storm in the 1990s. Bands like Nirvana, Pearl Jam, and Soundgarden didn't just define a genre, they defined a generation. Their raw, unapologetic sound echoed from Seattle basements to stadiums around the globe. And long before grunge, another musical icon called Seattle home, Jimi Hendrix. The guitar legend's electric riffs still echo through Washington's cultural memory, reminding the world that sometimes revolution comes not from politics, but from six strings and pure passion. But there's another cultural revolution happening here, one you might not expect: gaming. Washington is a powerhouse in the video game industry, home to giants like Valve, the creators of Steam, and legendary franchises like Half-Life and Nintendo of America, whose headquarters sit quietly in Redmond. Billions of dollars flow through Washington thanks to gaming, but here's the twist: it all started small. Before the billion-dollar companies, before esports, before gaming became mainstream, there was a tiny arcade culture in Seattle. In dimly lit rooms filled with flashing machines, kids and teenagers spent quarters and countless hours mastering Pac-Man, Donkey Kong, and pinball. Those little pockets of arcade life eventually grew into an industry that now shapes entertainment worldwide. It's a reminder that even global revolutions often start with something local, something small, and something fueled by passion. Put it all together, and Washington's lifestyle is a tapestry of contrasts. Passionate sports fans in roaring stadiums, families gathered around pickleball courts, chefs plating salmon caught hours earlier, musicians rewriting history in underground clubs, and game developers quietly changing the way the world plays. It's a culture that's proud, diverse, and endlessly innovative, yet always rooted in the unique spirit of the Pacific Northwest. So when you think of Washington, don't just think of rain, politics, or tech. Think of the roar of the crowd, the taste of a crisp apple, the sound of a grunge riff, and the glow of an arcade machine. This is Washington's culture, alive, dynamic, and impossible to forget. Washington is breathtaking, no doubt about it. Towering mountains, endless forests, rivers that carve valleys, and coastlines kissed by the Pacific, it feels like nature's masterpiece. But here's the truth: even the most beautiful places come with hidden scars, and Washington is no exception. For all its glory, the evergreen state is also a battleground, where the forces of climate change, human impact, and natural disasters collide. And the cost of preserving this paradise is higher than most people realize. Take a step into the forests of eastern Washington in the summer, and you'll notice something beyond the scent of pine and the chirping of birds: the thick haze of wildfires. These fires, once rare and seasonal, now threaten towns, destroy wildlife habitats, and choke the skies with smoke year after year. Rising temperatures and drier conditions have turned parts of Washington into tinderboxes, where a single spark can consume entire landscapes. It's not just the forests that burn. The people feel it too, from families forced to evacuate their homes to children breathing in smoke-filled air. The state that once prided itself on being evergreen is now learning just how fragile that greenery really is. And it doesn't stop there. Climate change is also hitting Washington's lifelines: its water, its glacier, and its salmon. Up in the Cascades and Olympic Mountains, glaciers that have existed for thousands of years are retreating at alarming rates. Rivers that rely on glacial melt for steady flow are shrinking, threatening not only ecosystems but also communities that depend on that water. And then there's the salmon, an animal that isn't just dinner on a plate, but a sacred symbol to Washington's native tribes and a keystone species for the environment. Warming waters, dams, and habitat destruction have made salmon runs weaker and weaker, placing cultural traditions and ecological balance on the line. When the salmon struggle, it's not just a fish problem. It's a warning sign of a system under stress. But perhaps the most haunting environmental challenge lies not in the forests or rivers, but in a desert-like stretch along the Columbia River in southeastern Washington, the Hanford nuclear site. Once the beating heart of America's nuclear weapons program, Hanford produced plutonium for the bomb that ended World War II. Today, it's one of the most contaminated sites in the Western Hemisphere. Leaking tanks filled with radioactive waste pose a constant threat to groundwater, the river, and the communities downstream. It's a reminder that even the most powerful scientific achievements can leave behind shadows that linger for generations. Hanford is both a monument to history and a warning of what happens when progress comes without foresight. And yet, despite these challenges, Washington is not giving up, it's fighting back. Across the state, conservation efforts are in motion. In the national parks, rangers and scientists work tirelessly to protect ecosystems, restore trails, and educate millions of visitors about responsible tourism. Along the rivers, organizations and tribes collaborate to restore salmon habitats, remove old dams, and give nature a fighting chance to heal. And in the forests, new strategies in wildfire management, from controlled burns to better emergency response, aim to protect communities from devastation. Even in Hanford, billions of dollars are being poured into cleanup efforts, though the process is slow and daunting. The truth is, Washington's challenges are enormous, but they're matched by its resilience. The people here understand that beauty isn't free, it requires care, sacrifice, and constant vigilance. Washington is more than just the evergreen state, it's the testing ground for how humanity faces the modern age of environmental crises. Narrator voice softens. Washington's beauty comes at a cost, its natural wonders face modern threats. But maybe that's what makes this place so powerful. It reminds us that paradise is fragile, and if we want it to last, we have to fight for it. And as the camera pulls back, showing forests swaying in the wind, glaciers shining under the sun, and salmon leaping against rushing rivers, we're left with a haunting truth. Washington's story isn't just about what it is today, but about whether we can preserve it for tomorrow. When you try to capture the essence of a place as vast and diverse as Washington, where do you even begin? With its towering mountains, its bustling cities, its endless forests. Maybe with the people who call it home. Washington has always been a state of symbols, powerful markers that attempt to define its spirit, its culture, and its legacy. And while some are official, printed neatly in books or carved proudly into state halls, others are unofficial, whispered in stories, lived out in struggles, and etched into the memory of its people. Officially, Washington goes by a name that immediately sparks the imagination, the Evergreen State. And it's not just a pretty label. This nickname captures the endless green forests that cloak the western half of the state, where moss carpets the ground, ferns curl in the shadows, and towering evergreens stand tall against grey skies. Even in winter, when much of the country turns bare, Washington's landscapes remain alive, lush, and timeless. The nickname isn't simply about trees, it's about continuity, about life that endures no matter the season. It's about a promise that Washington will always hold a piece of eternal nature. And then there are the creatures that symbolize its character. The American goldfinch, a tiny flash of yellow darting through the air, was chosen as the state bird. Small, bright, cheerful, it seems almost too delicate for a state so wild and rugged. Yet maybe that's the point. Even in a land of volcanoes and glacier, beauty exists in the smallest details. Then there's the Olympic marmot, the official state animal, found only in Washington's Olympic Peninsula. This furry, social creature, with its playful whistles echoing across mountain meadows, is unique to Washington alone. It represents something no other state can claim, a species that exists nowhere else on Earth but here. The western hemlock, Washington's state tree, adds to this portrait. Graceful yet strong, growing high in the damp forests of the coast, it's a reminder that strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes, it whispers in the form of silent growth year after year. These official symbols, bird, animal, tree, nickname, are like puzzle pieces. They give us glimpses of Washington's natural identity. But the real story of Washington's symbols goes beyond the official lists. The Space Needle, though not an official emblem, is instantly recognizable worldwide as a futuristic symbol of Seattle. The salmon, not named on state seals, is still central to Washington's cultural soul, feeding its people, sustaining its tribes, and representing a timeless cycle of life. And let's not forget the apple. Washington produces more apples than any other state, and for many around the globe, that crisp fruit is the first thing they imagine when they hear the name Washington. Yet, the most powerful symbol of all may not be found in a tree, a bird, or a building. It's something far more profound. Washington's true identity is written in its resilience. This is a place that has been shaped and reshaped countless times. From the ancient tribes who thrived here for millennia, to the early settlers who endured the wilderness, to the tech pioneers who transformed it into a hub of innovation, Washington has always been reinventing itself. It has weathered volcanic eruptions, economic depressions, and cultural revolutions, and each time, it has emerged not weaker but stronger, carrying forward both tradition and progress. Plot twist ending. Washington's true symbol isn't something you can put on a flag or carve into an emblem. It isn't the goldfinch, the marmot, or even the evergreen forests. It's the spirit of reinvention. Washington has shown the world that identity is not fixed, it's alive, growing, and adapting just like the landscapes that define it. And that's why, when you think of Washington, you shouldn't just see the Space Needle or Mount Rainier. You should see resilience itself, a state that has proven, again and again, that it can face any challenge and still thrive. As the screen fades out, imagine the voice softening. Washington's identity is more than its symbols. It is the resilience of its people, the endurance of its landscapes, and the courage of a state that never stops reinventing itself. That, more than anything, is the true spirit of the evergreen state. As the music swells and the final images of Washington's landscape sweep across the screen, the story begins to tighten into one unforgettable message. Washington is not just another American state, it is a paradox, a living contradiction, a place where nothing is ever quite what you expect. Yes, it's the land of rain and coffee, but it's also so much more. From the jagged peaks of the Cascades to the rolling farmlands of the East, from bustling Seattle skyscrapers to quiet tribal lands that have endured for thousands of years, Washington is a place that refuses to be placed neatly into a box. Think about it. On one side, you have Seattle, the futuristic, tech-driven city that powers the digital age. Microsoft, Amazon, Nintendo of America, and countless startups all call it home. But drive just a few hours east, and you'll find yourself in Yakima Valley, where orchards stretch as far as the eye can see, and life revolves not around algorithms or apps but around soil, water, and the timeless rhythm of harvest. This is Washington's great secret. It doesn't belong to one single narrative. It thrives on the tension between opposites. And then there are the landscapes themselves. In the west, rainforests drip with moss, waves crash against rocky coasts, and glacier carve their way down mountainsides. In the east, wide open skies stretch over golden fields, rivers cut deep canyons, and deserts bloom with wildflowers in the spring. It is a state where one day you can stand on a beach, and the next, you can trek across snowfields beneath a volcano. Few places in the world can offer that kind of dramatic shift in so short a distance. But Washington is not just about what you see, it's about what you feel. The people here carry stories as diverse as the land itself. From the more than 29 recognized tribes whose roots go back thousands of years, to immigrants from Asia, Europe, and Latin America who helped shape its industries and culture, Washington is built on a mosaic of traditions. Seattle may have become the coffee capital of the world, but its cultural flavor is far richer, brewed from centuries of migration, resilience, and reinvention. And that's where the twist of the story comes full circle. Remember how at the very beginning, when we said Washington, your mind probably jumped to politics, to the White House, to a very different place on the other side of the country? That's the irony. For many people, this Washington, the evergreen state, exists in the shadows of its namesake, often overlooked or confused. Yet in reality, this Washington might just be America's most fascinating state. Because while the other Washington represents government and power, this one represents resilience, creativity, and contrasts so sharp they reshape how you see America itself. It's a place where the past and the future live side by side. Ancient petroglyphs carved into canyon walls coexist with billion-dollar tech campuses. Salmon runs that have sustained native tribes for generations swim beneath bridges filled with self-driving cars. Grunge music that once shook the world in smoky Seattle clubs still echoes in a city now powered by innovation and global trade. Washington never erases its past, it folds it into its future. And maybe that's why people fall in love with it. It's not because Washington is perfect. Its reign can be relentless. Its politics are often divided. Its environment faces challenges from wildfires to nuclear waste. Yet in every challenge, Washington has shown a spirit that refuses to give up. Like the evergreen forests that stay vibrant through every storm, Washington endures. It adapts. It reinvents itself. So, the next time you hear the word Washington, pause for a moment. Don't just think of the nation's capital or the marble halls of politics. Think instead of soaring volcanoes, misty rainforests, orchards heavy with apples, coffee shops buzzing with ideas, and coastlines where the waves never stop crashing. Think of a state that is not one thing, but many. A state of contrasts, of contradictions, of endless reinvention. Because in the end, Washington isn't just a state on a map, it's a story. A story of mountains and deserts, tribes and tech, past and future. A story that reveals something essential not just about one place, but about the spirit of America itself. And as the music softens and the drone camera pulls back one final time, soaring over the Seattle skyline with Mount Rainier glowing in the distance, the narrator's voice returns. Washington isn't just the land of rain and coffee, it's a story of contrasts. The next time you hear the word Washington, remember, there's more than one. And this one might just be America's most fascinating state. The shot lingers, the city lights flicker, and then slowly fade into black. Words appear on the screen. Subscribe for more stories.